Hello and welcome to Recreation and Quiz Studio. Get comfortable, relax, and let's take a journey together through 3 warm and engaging stories. Each story is meant to spark memories, laughter, and conversation. Story 1. The Quilt in the Attic. Helen Whitaker had lived in the same yellow house on Maple Street for over 60 years. The home, nestled beneath 2 ancient elms, was where she'd raised 3 children, tended a vegetable garden the size of a dance floor, and made peach preserves that neighbors still talked about. But now, at 83, Helen was preparing to move in with her daughter and needed to finally face the attic. She had avoided the attic for decades, not because it was frightening, but because it was full of boxes she had promised herself she would sort through, someday. That someday had finally arrived. With a deep breath and the help of her grandson, Marcus, she opened the narrow door and climbed the steep steps, swatting at dust motes in the late morning light. The attic was stuffy, smelling faintly of cedar and thyme. Boxes lined the walls, some labeled in her late husband's handwriting, others anonymous. In the far corner, beneath a sheet, Helen noticed a large trunk she didn't recognize. "What's that one?" Marcus asked, as he helped her pull it into the center of the room. They lifted the lid together. Inside lay a folded quilt, neatly preserved and surprisingly vibrant, given its age. Patches of worn denim, flannel, gingham, and lace created a pattern of stars and stripes, not in patriotic colors, but in soft earth tones. Helen gasped. "I haven't seen this in over 50 years, she whispered. She explained to Marcus that the quilt had been stitched by her mother and grandmother during the winters of the Great Depression. Each piece came from something meaningful: my grandfather's overalls, my mother's apron, a dress I wore when I was 5. This quilt is a family history you can hold." Tucked beneath the quilt was a bundle of letters wrapped in a silk ribbon. Helen picked them up carefully and read the first one aloud. It was a note her grandmother had written to her own sister in 1932, describing cold nights, canning beans, and her husband's efforts to keep the farm afloat. For the next hour, Helen and Marcus read through letters, examined scraps of fabric, and shared stories. Some Helen had forgotten, others she had never known. Marcus snapped photos of the quilt and letters on his phone and suggested creating a digital scrapbook. "We could share it with the whole family," he said. As they repacked the trunk, Helen felt both light and full. The attic no longer loomed over her with its weight of memories. Instead, it felt like a gift she was now ready to pass along. She looked at Marcus with misty eyes. "I thought I was just cleaning. But I was really remembering." A week later, at Helen's farewell gathering, the quilt was laid across the dining table, and guests were invited to find their family patch and write a note for the digital scrapbook. Laughter and tears mingled as old photos were passed around and stories retold with fresh appreciation. Helen didn't say much that day, but she watched with quiet joy as her family gathered around the quilt. It wasn't just a blanket, she realized. It was a bridge, a cloth map of their history, stitched with care, preserved with love, and rediscovered just in time. Here are some discussion questions for the group. Please pause the video and discuss and reminisce. Hope you enjoyed the first story. Story 2: The Man on the Beach. For 15 years, a man sat on the same park bench in front of City Hall nearly every afternoon. Always wearing a green wool cap and a brown overcoat, regardless of the weather, he was a fixture of the neighborhood. Locals simply referred to him as the bench man, and though he rarely spoke, he always nodded politely. Children whispered theories about him. Was he a spy? A writer? Someone waiting for a long-lost love? He never carried a phone or a book, just a small notebook, in which he occasionally scribbled. The townsfolk accepted his presence as they did the clock tower, constant, familiar, mysterious. It was Eliza, a retired school librarian, who finally broke the silence. One spring day, she sat beside him with her cup of coffee and asked, "Do you mind if I share this bench?" He nodded, as always. But then, after a pause, he added, "Please do." The words startled her. It was the first time anyone remembered him speaking. She introduced herself and asked if he was from the area. "Born here, left, came back," he said. She smiled, unsure if that was all she'd get. It was, for that day. The next afternoon, she came again. This time, she brought a crossword puzzle. When she got stuck, she asked him a clue. Without looking, he answered correctly. The day after that, he corrected her spelling. By the end of the week, they were puzzling together like old friends. Bit by bit, she learned his name was Arthur. He'd once been a professor. His wife had passed a decade ago, and he had no children. "This bench," he said one day, "is where we first met." She spilled tea on me, then insisted on buying me lunch. Touched, Eliza began to bring her own stories to share. She spoke of her students, her travels, the way she missed her dog named Buttons. Arthur listened, smiled, and sometimes jotted something in his notebook. When she asked what he was writing, he simply said, "Bits of life." One day, Arthur wasn't there. Nor the next. A sign appeared on the bench, in honor of Arthur Cole, who remembered and was remembered. A bouquet rested beneath it. Eliza sat beside it and cried. Later that month, Eliza received a package in the mail. It was Arthur's notebook. The letter included said he had named her as someone who deserved to know. Inside were poems, fragments of stories, even sketches. At the back was one simple entry: Eliza, kind, curious, crossword queen. Eliza had a small plaque made and quietly placed it on the bench below Arthur's. It read, "Arthur and Eliza, a friendship built one word at a time." Now she sits there each afternoon, always with a crossword, and always with a second pencil. Here are some discussion questions for the group. Hope you enjoyed the story. Pause the video if necessary to discuss. Story 3. The Fish That Got Away, Twice. Roger had been telling the same fish story at every family picnic for 20 years. It was about the big one he almost caught on Lake Barkley in 1984, a monstrous catfish that supposedly snapped his line and disappeared with his favorite lure. No one believed him, but everyone loved hearing it. The tale involved a thunderstorm, a near capsizing, a broken cooler, and a dramatic retelling of a catfish the size of a golden retriever. Roger had even framed a photo of himself looking wet and indignant in a rowboat as supposed proof. He always ended the story the same way: "One day, I'll catch him. He owes me a lure." When Roger passed away at 79, the family honored his request. His ashes were to be scattered on Lake Barkley. They rented a pontoon, packed sandwiches, and took turns sharing memories on the way to the center of the lake. His granddaughter Casey, now 28, brought along a small fishing pole. "Grandpa would have wanted one last try," she joked. As the boat slowed to a drift, she cast a line with a replica of the missing lure Roger had described so many times. They all laughed when the bobber started bouncing wildly. "It's him," someone yelled. Casey reeled in with a dramatic flare until the line snapped. "Guess he got away again," she shrugged, with a wink. Typical Grandpa. But then, the oddest thing happened. When they returned to shore and were unpacking, Casey noticed something glinting inside the picnic cooler. It was a small, rusted metal object, an old fishing lure, tangled in what looked like ancient line. She held it up in disbelief. Roger's sister, Bev, gasped. "That looks just like the one he used to wear on his hat in the 80s, she said. "The same one he said the catfish swiped." The family stared. "But how did it get in the cooler?" someone asked. No one had an answer. They cleaned it up, and sure enough, carved into the side was a barely visible RM. Roger's initials. Whether it had been planted, or truly found its way home, no one could say. But everyone agreed it was classic Roger. One final twist to keep the story alive. The lure was mounted in a shadow box and now hangs in the family cabin with a little plaque: "The Fish That Got Away, Twice." Below it, someone scribbled in pen, "But not before returning Grandpa's favorite lure." Now, every year at the family picnic, they retell the story with the new ending and cast a line in the same spot on Lake Barkley. And whether the fish was ever real, one thing is certain: Roger's story keeps reeling in smiles, year after year. Here are some discussion questions for the group. Please pause the video if necessary and discuss. Hope you enjoyed the story. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories and fun from Recreation and Quiz Studio.